Hello, everyone. It is Dana Gibson here again. I'm back to introduce James Trice. He is a member of our Midwest BDC coalition and is leading the Federal Working Policy Group. He's also the CEO and of Public Policy Project. Excuse me. Let me tell you more about James. As I mentioned, he's the CEO of Public Policy Project and the founder. Which is a consulting and training company. Over the years, he's worked in tenants' rights, community organizing, public policy, and environmental justice. His work centers people of color and low-income families and individuals. James believes that people have far more power than they realize and should lead in decisions that impact their lives. The most affected by issues have the greatest reason to invest in generating alternative outcomes. I'm going to hand the floor over to James Trice. Thank you, James.
Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? All right, I'll mute myself, I guess. Am I unmuted? Am I good? Can everybody hear me?
We can hear you, James. Go right ahead.
Thank you so much, Dana, for that wonderful introduction. Let me start by giving a shout out to the Midwest Building Decarbonization staff, Marnice, Jacob, Edward, Terry, Maggie, Joanne, and of course, the incomparable Dana, who just introduced me. Thank you so much for all of that. Let me start by saying to the audience that I'm not purporting to be an expert in lobbying. There's still so much to learn in this work because it changes depending on the elected officials and policy change and how the system operates, and even with this upcoming election, the potential for a shift in how we operate in America may occur, and that can change how we engage our decision makers. So anyway, thank you so much for the introduction. I want to give you a brief overview of really focusing in on how you engage, how you engage legislators at the state level and how we can engage more civically with decision makers at every level of government, and also not to mention the local government policies that I think impact us more than federal. And so I just want to start by saying I encourage everybody to get out and vote in every single election, state and local. Make your voice heard. So can we move to the next? So as Dana mentioned, in 2001, I created the Public Policy Project as an independent provider of public policy consulting, leadership training, civic engagement training, lobbying, environmental and social justice strategies, planning, and advocacy services, addressing policy issues impacting Black and Brown people, other communities of color, and low-income communities. Public policy provides a vehicle for these communities to understand both the role of public policy in shaping their experience of oppression and marginalization, and the opportunity to generate improved policy platforms to better promote their well-being. We believe that people have far more power than they realize, and too often allow problems to fester, posing serious risks to their future, and that to bring about a truly egalitarian democracy, individuals must develop the capacity to organize consciousness and living infrastructures of the participatory democracy to actively transform public policy in their interests. Next slide. So what is lobbying? Lobbying is trying to influence governmental action by communicating with or urging others to communicate with public policy officials at local officials and policy subdivisions. Next slide. So some of the work that I've done, so then you can have an understanding of some of the work that I've done as a lobbyist, registered lobbyist. I served as the official lobbyist for the Northside Policy Action Coalition at the Minnesota legislature. Impact was comprised of 6 community organizations, 501c3s, dedicated to serving North Minneapolis residents and and stakeholders that represents the largest population of African Americans or ADOS people in Minnesota. Let me explain what ADOS is for some of you who don't know. American descendants of slavery. We want to be specific that when we say African Americans, we include, or when we say ADOS, we want to make sure that we're specifically talking about those individuals who are descendants of the institution of slavery. Many times we say BIPOC or people of color, and ADOS people are left out. We need to begin to use the term ADOS to really categorize us who are descendants of this institution of the institution of slavery. To advocate effectively for their community, the coalition pooled their allowable lobbying financial resources to engage public policy project as their registered lobbyists. And I get into more of what I mean when they say they pool their resources, because there's specific laws and regulation that that 501c3s have to abide by, and part of that is how much money they spend in direct lobbying or even grassroots lobbying. From 2008 to 2011, I represented the Northside Policy Action Coalition at the Minnesota legislative session. During this time, we played a crucial role in shaping and executing the Northside Policy Action Coalition's policy agenda for North Minneapolis. Our efforts include, next slide, agenda development and execution. We collaborated with Impact to create a comprehensive policy agenda for each legislative session and executing the coalition's directive. The legislation and management. We initiated new bills, monitoring legislative process, supported or opposed proposed legislation based on Impact's policy agenda. Community organizing. We organized coalition partners. We recruited additional North Minneapolis organizations to join Impact, and fostering alliances with other Minnesota organizations pursuing similar legislative goals. The Legislative Communication. We maintain regular communication with North Minneapolis legislators and the Twin Cities Legislative Delegation, facilitated community meetings to keep residents informed about legislative developments affecting their community. So we continue to educate the community on what is happening at the legislature. Advocacy campaigns, organizing the Impact's Day on the Hill campaigns to advocate for their policy agenda. So we actually facilitated, organized their Day on the Hill, where we brought people from all over, not just North Minneapolis, individuals who were affected by some of the policies that we were proposing, Impact, and also some of the policies that were being proposed by other groups. Next slide. In addition to state-level lobbying, the Public Policy Project actively addressed policy issues at local levels, including city, county, and school jurisdictions. So it wasn't just at the legislature, but all decision-making bodies under the guidance of the Northside Policy Action Coalition. We provided timely, prioritized information to coalition members, community organizations, residents, significantly enhancing North Minneapolis's presence in the state policymaking process. We want to be clear that many times when you're at, and some of you, maybe most of you, have visited your state legislature, visit your capitals, and you don't see a lot of us there. Many times you see one or two of us walking the halls and meeting with legislators. And when I say us, I mean Black folks, ADOS people. And we have to make sure that we have our voices heard. And we, because that's a foundation of what we do, we made sure that we had a significant face visible at the legislature. They seen Black folks there on a regular basis. And it was intimidating to them because they didn't expect to see us, but we were there in full force. We maintain transparency and accountability by delivering detailed written reports to coalition partners. These reports highlighted key legislative items, identified supporters and opponents, and tracked the progress of bills that impact Northside Policy Action Coalition was on their agenda. We ensured continuous engagement Public Policy Project held weekly and ad hoc meetings with the coalition and provided monthly written reports, written updates, keeping all partners well informed and involved in the legislative process. We want to make sure that we communicated constantly with the Northside Policy Action Coalition. Through these comprehensive efforts, James Trice and the Public Policy Project made significant strides in advancing the policy interests of North Minneapolis, empowering the community to have a stronger, more influential voice in the legislative arena. Next slide. So what is governmental action? When I said, policy, doing public lobbying to impact governmental action, let me just be clear. Each state has its own rules and regulations for how we lobby, how they lobby, and so you need to look at your state, do some research for your state. I do have some links that we'll be sharing later. Practical guidance for nonprofits. What nonprofits need to know about how to lobby at their state level. This one is from Minnesota Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board. This is how we in the state of Minnesota define what is governmental action. Government action means action by the state legislator and by the governor in his or her role in the legislative process. 2, actions by state agencies, including boards and commissions in rulemaking. So again, policy, public policy, or lobbying is to get and influence governmental action. 3, official actions of political subdivisions, actions by the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission in rulemaking and in cases of rate setting. Power plant, power lines, siting, and granting of certificates of need under Section 216B.243. Next slide. A political subdivision is any of the following: counties, municipalities, school districts, soil and water conservation districts, watershed management organizations, watershed districts, hospital districts, public corporations, port authorities, regional railway authorities, the Metropolitan Council, metropolitan agencies as defined in the Minnesota statute, including the Metropolitan Airport Commission, the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission, and the Metropolitan Sports Facilities Commission, right? And this is what they define, and Minnesota defined as political subdivision. Let me share something about the Metropolitan Council. Metropolitan Council is a 7-county group of appointed individuals by the governor to address issues within those counties. I think only 2 states, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe others, individuals can correct me, that have metropolitan councils, and that is the state of Minnesota, and I think the state of Washington have metropolitan councils. Next slide. Rules for lobbying, right? And let me just also preface again, and this is really important, that the rules for lobbying may vary state by state, right? And so I encourage you to look at what the rules for lobbying in your state is. Now, there's some basic rules that cover all lobbying, and some of this is included here, but there's some nuances. There are some nuances based on state and how state government operates. I know, the state legislature here doesn't meet all year. They meet like 5-6 months out of the year and take a break, right? So rules for lobbying activities for 501c3s and 501c4s. And this may be general and to all states, right? But look at your state again to see what they're saying. Organizations differ significantly due to their distinct tax-exempt status and purpose. Every state sets its own rules and regulations for what constitutes lobbying as determined by their state legislature. An organization or group can comment on, support, or oppose any issue, but is prevented from lobbying on behalf of a specific politician. So regardless of if you're lobbying, you cannot lobby for or against a particular politician. You can't say we support so-and-so and we oppose so-and-so. You cannot do that. But you can, move particular policy issues. You can say what politicians stand for, what their political leaning is, but you can't say or encourage the public to support or oppose a particular politician. So let me be clear about that. And that's specific, that's for all states, no matter what the rules say in your state regarding how to lobby. As a paid lobbyist representing an organization, as I was, or a group of organizations, you are responsible for reporting the activities performed and the amount of money the organization or group spent on lobbying activities. So let me just stop and share this. As the lobbyist for Northside Policy Action Coalition, I was responsible for reporting how much money those organizations spent on lobbying activities. I was responsible for reporting how much money I was getting paid and how much money was paid on either like transporting constituents to the legislature to speak on behalf of a particular policy issue, whether we fed them, right? Like we brought a busload of people to the Capitol and we wanted them to talk in particular committees around particular bills. If we fed them, we had to, we couldn't give them money, but if we fed them, we had to report that we fed them. We had to report, how much it costs for us for the transportation. If we had to rent out a van or something like that, we had to report all of that. And as the registered lobbyist for Impact, I had to report that. So there needed to be a great relationship between the lobbyists, in my case, myself, and the 6 organizations that made up the Northside Policy Action Coalition. And I was responsible for the reporting. Now, and I'm gonna get into this in a second, I didn't include in these slides the lobbying at the federal level, but I'm going to comment on some of that because there is a difference between between lobbying at the state level and lobbying at the federal level. I worked for a national organization out of DC and Oakland, and I was the lobbyist to move some federal policies, right? And was able to really connect with senators in Congress, representatives in Congress, as well as the president of the United States. So lobbying at the federal level seeks to influence federal lawmakers and policymakers, including the president. All right, so you engage Congress and the president to shape legislative policies at a national level, which includes, what the federal government is responsible for: commerce, immigration, defense, and so forth, right? As a lobbyist at the federal level, you only had to navigate the U.S. House and Senate, as opposed to in a state level juggling different state agencies and that kind of thing. Also, at the federal level, it could get they're completely there's some strict regulations at the federal level as opposed to the state level. Again, you still have to report at the state level, right? You still have to register. If you're getting paid to lobby, you have to register. So if you are moving some policies and you're getting paid to do that, you have to register as a lobbyist, right? At the state level, at the federal level, you still have to register as a lobbyist, but you also have to fill out a Lobbying Disclosure Act form. So you have to fill out those forms. Again, I didn't get into this because of the limited time I have, and I didn't include the federal engagement or policy lobbying in this presentation, but I can get that to individuals at some point later. As I get back to my slide, paid lobbyists must report which groups or organizations they are lobbying for and how much they are being paid by each group or organization. In this case, with Impact, I had to report again what each paid to me or what each paid to organize or to lobby. A person can lobby as much as they like on their own behalf or on behalf of their community without being paid, and does not have to report their lobbying activities if they're not being paid. If you're being paid, you have to report that. You have to register as a lobbyist. Now, different states may require a threshold, meaning that if some states may say if you're getting paid more than $500, you have to report. Anything less than that, you don't have to report. I think in Minnesota at this point, I think anything, maybe anything, I was on the safe side. What I chose to do is, regardless of what I was getting paid as a registered lobbyist, I report what I was getting paid and who paid me, just so that I wouldn't get in trouble. Next slide, please. Types of lobbying. So direct lobbying. Direct lobbying, again, is communicating with legislators or government officials directly to influence specific lobbying, right? The direct lobbying I'm confused now. Anyway, I'm sorry. Direct lobbying is exactly what it is. It's you directly engaging policymakers yourself, right? And then grassroots lobbying is attempting to influence legislation by encouraging the general public to contact legislators about a specific piece of legislation. All right. And so prohibited activities include engaging in excessive lobbying beyond prescribed limits, or participating in any political campaign or activities for or against a political candidate. And I shared that earlier. Earlier in my slide. So next slide, please. Lobbying as a 501c3 organization. 501c3 organizations can engage in lobbying, but it must not constitute a substantial part of their overall activities. There are two tests to measure this, and this is in the state of Minnesota. There may be some other tests that you have to in your state, but I ask that you check that out as well. So two tests: substantial part test. This is a subjective test that looks at the extent of lobbying activities relative to the overall activities of the organization. So in other words, it compares how much lobbying work you're doing as opposed to other work that you are doing with regard to other activities that you do, whether it mean organizing groups of people, whatever you're doing as a 501c3, whatever your organization does. If more of your work is lobbying than doing that work, you are prohibited from doing that. So as a 501c3, and again, the specific amount is determined by state. So I encourage you to look at that. And again, just want to emphasize that a substantial amount of your work cannot be lobbying as a 501c3. The expenditure test, and this determines how much money you spend, and you have to file form, excuse me, IRS form 5768. This is an IRS form that means it's federal. So all organizations, 501c3s, have to file this form that can opt to have their lobbying activities measured by the amount of money spent on lobbying. So specific expenditure limits are based on the size of the organization's budget. So depending on what your budget is, like with Northside Policy Action Coalition, each one of them contributed 20% of their budget to pay me to lobby or to pay for lobbying work. So each one of them brought 20% of their budget. Regardless of the sizes of their budget, neither one of them spent more than 20% of their budget on lobbying. And so you can opt to have that test done. And when you do that test, they will determine whether you went over that amount. This test provides clear spending limits and often offers more clarity and safety for the organization. So then, you're safer in some regards, if you do it this way, as opposed to determining how much of your activity or the do is lobbying. So this really sets helps you to understand if you're overdoing it, if you determine it by if you determine it by how much money you spend. Next slide. I got 8 minutes left. All right. Lobbying as a 501c4, lobbying and political activities. 501c4 organization, also known as social welfare organization, can engage in unlimited lobbying activities if these activities are in pursuit of promoting social welfare. This includes direct lobbying, grassroots lobbying, political campaign activities. However, political activities should not be the primary activity of the organization. Again, the same thing applies here with regard to how much you use, how much you spend on lobbying. Tax exemption for 501c4s, contributions to 501c4 organizations are not tax deductible. So contributions to 501c4 organizations are not tax deductibles. However, 501c3 organizations are. Unlike 501c3 organizations, 501c4 entities are not required to seek formal IRS recognition for their state tax exempt status, but must notify the IRS of their intent to operate as a 501c4 within 60 days of incorporation. Next slide. Lobbying as an organization continue. Both types of organizations, 501c3 or C4, must maintain proper documentation and compliance with IRS rules to avoid jeopardizing their tax exempt status. You could lose your tax exempt status if you violate the rules of lobbying. So be clear about that. So make sure you know what the rules are in your state. Nonprofit organizations considering lobbying activities should carefully review these rules and potentially consult legal counsel to ensure compliance. I encourage you to get a lawyer if that's what you need to do in order to make sure that you are in compliance with this. For further details, you can refer to resources provided by the IRS on nonprofit advocacy organizations like the National Council on Nonprofits. Next slide, please. Civic engagement. Civic engagement provides the active participation, involves the active participation of individuals and groups in addressing political, social, economic, educational, health, and environmental issues that impact or that in fact affect them and their communities with the intent to make a meaningful difference and create positive change for themselves and the future of their community. It is about making your voice heard and being part of the change you want to see. That's what civic engagement is. Next slide. The types of civic engagements, speaking up about issues that concern you in your community, organize your community around a common cause, participating in groups or organizations dedicated to causes you care about, voting in local, state, and national elections, protesting to raise awareness and demand change, encouraging others to get involved and make their voice heard, engaging with elected officials to advocate for your community, educating yourself and others about the important issues, and mobilizing your community to raise awareness about critical societal issues. One thing I'm very, very concerned about is the lack of political awareness that exists, not only in the Black community, but all over. You know, as we all know, when I was coming up, when I was going to school in Illinois, we had civics. And we learned about government, how government works, the three branches of government. We understood that. We knew how it worked. We knew how to engage. It was in the 9th grade I learned this. They don't teach this anymore. And you ask kids nowadays, and not just kids, adults as well, what are the three branches of government and what do they do? And people couldn't tell you. People couldn't tell you who their policymaker is at either level, state, federal level. They couldn't tell you who they are and even what they do. We need to be more politically knowledgeable and aware of what is happening around us, who's moving what policies. I do want to say this, right? And this is really something that's critical to me. And I only got a few minutes left, but I think it's really, really important. When I was lobbying, let's go to the next slide. When I was doing a lot of the lobbying work, I assume that individuals who I help elect, who I voted for, had my best interest at hand. And when I try to move policies and approach them around signing on to particular bills, They would not. Or individuals who I assume didn't agree with me, right? And we went to them, and actually they supported the bill. It was interesting. I remember there was an education bill that Northside Policy Action Coalition was moving. We approached our legislators, who we voted for, who represented us, about signing on to a particular bill. They said, "Give me some time. We're going to think about it." It was an issue that was critical to them. We also wanted bipartisan support, so we went to some Republicans to ask them to sign the bill. And one particular bill that I was moving, I was working at the legislature, meeting with different legislators to try to get them to sign on to the jacket so we can get it, in place. And I had a Republican individual who signed the bill. It was an education bill that was significant. It was important, and I think it was something that we needed in the Black and brown communities. And a Republican signed the bill first. So I went to a DFL legislator, a Democrat, who we supported, and asked this individual to sign on to the bill. And they looked at the bill, they loved the bill, but they would not sign it. And the reason why they would not sign it, because he said to me directly, "I'm not signing anything GOP." He would not sign the bill because a Republican signed it first. And the bill affected his community, his constituents. It was baffling to me. And I was really taken aback. This was like, hold on a second. This is something you're supposed to sign. He said, "But we cannot do that. We're not going to sign any bills that were signed by the opposite party." And that has to change. We really need to hold our elected officials accountable. We're reaching out to your elected officials, whether by letter, email, phone calls, text messages. Follow these guidelines to make your communications more effective. So this is when you're meeting with your legislature. This is when you're meeting with, whether it's a legislator that you agree with or you don't agree with, and you're trying to get a bill passed. State your full name and the purpose at the beginning of the meeting, who you are and your purpose. Mention that you are a constituent and that you do vote. And particularly when you're meeting individuals who are your legislator, who's supposed to represent you, who you voted for, or individuals who represent you, you didn't vote for, but they represent you. But state that you are a constituent, right? Regardless if they're Republican or Democrat or Green or whatever else. Get to the point quickly. Keep it brief. Address only one issue per correspondent. Don't try to hit them with like no more than one issue. Let me just be clear with you. Just one issue, right? Give name of the bill and House Senate file number if there is one. All right. Be respectful, courteous, regardless of your political alignment. Let me just say this, and this is something that I just want to let people know. Relationship is everything. You build relationship with the particular legislator's policy aide or assistant. That is a tremendous benefit. It will net you some gains that you wouldn't expect, right? Be friendly, be respectful, build relationship with their aides. I guarantee you that you will get a meeting with your legislator. They will put you above people who are already on the list if you are courteous to them. So be very friendly with your legislators' aides or and their assistants or whoever else, that their staff people that work with them. That will get you a long way. It has gotten me things passed, it's gotten me meetings that I didn't think I would have, gotten me meetings, last minute meetings where I said, I need to meet with them. And they would, this person right away, and they were able to put me in. Include important information and examples to illustrate your point. Explain why the issue is important to you personally. So don't talk about anybody else. Talk about why this issue is important to you personally. Use your own words and thoughts. Don't use somebody else's words, slogans, whatever. Use your own words. Be clear about what you want them to do. Tell them you want them to support it or you want them to oppose particular bills, because there are things you want them to oppose. Be clear about that. Thank them for their time and leave your contact information. And I got a few minutes left. Can you go to the next slide? How much time do I got left, Edward?
You got 3 minutes, but so if you can wrap it up in 3, we can do it.
Edward, I can wrap it up in 3.
All right, let's go.
All right. Connecting with your legislator. If you cannot connect with your legislator in person, like while they're out in the community or whatever else, or in public, make an appointment by calling their office or speaking to the legislative aide. Again, this is where relationship building with their aides come into play, and it's very, very important. If you are friendly and courteous with them, regardless of the legislators on your side or whether you voted for them or not, be courteous, you will get a meeting, guarantee you. Keep the appointment. Don't cancel the appointment unless absolutely necessary. Again, be friendly and courteous, as I said before, at all times, even with them, even though they oppose your bill, they may oppose what you're trying to move. Still be friendly with them. Meeting location, meet at a decision maker's office or another location in the district, even if it requires traveling. If you have to travel far, go meet with them. Always be on time and do not be late. Next slide. Let me wrap this up. Tips for lobbying: meet with your legislator in groups of 2 or 3, no more. Identify yourself as a constituent. If possible, give your legislator a one-page handout which succinctly explains the issue and clearly states why it is important. Be conscious, be brief, get straight to the point, ask for their position. Ask them what their position is on the issue, even if you already know. I encourage you to do your research to already know what their position is, but ask them anyway when you meet with them. And I think last slide, and I think I'll be done. Be friendly, be respectful, don't exaggerate, tell the truth. If you don't know, if they ask your question, you don't know, be honest, I don't know, I'll get back to you. If a letter doesn't support your issue, smile, thank you for their time. I guess I said this before, leave one page, follow up with your legislator in writing and thank them in a thank you letter or email, and thank them for their time. I think last slide, next slide, please. And I think I'm done. Be politically educated. So how can citizens be effective advocates? Be politically educated. Please, people, I want to encourage you. If I can encourage you more, it's the last thing I'm saying to you is please get educated, know who represents you and why, know what their policy stances are, know all the candidates running for office and what they stand for, all the candidates, whether you agree or not. So I encourage you to look at what Donald Trump's platform is, as well as what Kamala Harris's platform is. I encourage you and your legislators really talk about and understand what they think and what they believe and what they're trying to move, what they support it. Educate your children, your family, your friends. Don't take anything for granted. Don't assume anything. Don't be so wedded to your own political position. Listen to all sides of an issue, right? Challenge what you think you know. Always be willing to learn. Remember that there are no permanent enemies, no permanent friends. And I think last slide, I think this should be the last slide. As the great Ella Baker said, if we want to better the world, we cannot hope for it. We must demand it. I thank you for your time. I apologize. We had limited time. Next time we can go into how to engage at the federal level, your Congress and the U.S. House and Senate.
Thank you, James. Appreciate it so much. Thank you.